Okay, so it's time for the final panel for those of you who have been able to make it through an entire Friday. So at this point, I'd like to call up Jennifer Friend-Smith, who will be moderating our panel, and the panelists to come take their seats.
Thank you so much for inviting me to moderate this panel. It's certainly a topic that I have great interest in, working with youth experiencing homelessness, now having a broader access to post-high school education. And as our educational community continues to broaden and change in some really beautiful ways, we have to take a look at how it is that we're teaching and see if there aren't some things that we need to change within the teaching community to actually rise up and meet the different opportunities and needs that our students have. So I am excited to be here, and I apologize, these are my weird readers, the only ones I could find, and the vacuum that is my car today. So I think that what I will do is allow for our panelists to introduce themselves, and perhaps we can start with Vice Provost Dennin and then kind of head this way.
Okay, so I am Michael Dennin, Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, Dean of the Division of Undergraduate Education, also a professor in physics and astronomy. And though I helped co-organize this with people, I will say my role on here is as perhaps the implementation arm of the university when it comes to implementing and helping faculty sort of move new teaching strategies, thoughts, and exercises into the classroom.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and I just have to say kudos for those of you sticking around for 4:30 panel. You should all get extra raises, so look under your seat. There may be a prize for you for being here. There isn't. I'm just thinking it's great that we're here at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Willie Banks, I'm the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at University of California, Irvine, and part of my role and responsibility is to lead the Division of Student Affairs really around engagement issues and making sure that our students are really connecting what's happening in the classroom into the curricular world, the co-curricular world. So part of my responsibility is to make sure that we are working with our partners in the academic side of the house and making sure that there are connections and that people understand those connections as far as what's happening within our housing communities, our student organizations, leadership development, and then also all of the plethora of things that we offer through student affairs. So that's just a short snapshot of the work of student affairs.
I'm Richard Arum. I'm the Dean of UCI School of Education. So we're in charge of the research part of this. What's interesting about the School of Education at UCI, often schools of education are on the periphery of research universities. They're often the poor stepchild at a research university. Here we're working very hard to have the School of Education be at the core, the center of the research university, informing how we serve the diverse students attending UCI. And one example of that, the faculty of 35, we have 10 of them working not just on higher education in general out there in the field, but we have 10 of them working on improving higher education here at UCI, doing active research to improve how we serve students here. I don't think that's happening anywhere else in the country.
I'm Diane O'Dowd, Vice Provost of Academic Personnel, and I'm also a professor in developmental and cell biology. And my role in this is to work hard to figure out how we can value and evaluate teaching in the merit and promotion system, because as Sylvia talked about, we can encourage change with our words and our actions, but what really moves the needle is when it's part of the merit and promotion system and pay system, and so that's my role in this.
Well, and a bit about me and why it is that, again, this issue is important to me. I am a very proud alumna, class of 95 social ecology, and one of the reasons that I began getting so engaged as an alumna at UCI is because of our student body population. And really the leadership that UCI is taking in education and being very strategic and integrated in its approach by utilizing research and cross-campus and cross expertise skill sets to actually bring the best education to the best students. And really in a way that is acknowledging the change in our student population and embracing and celebrating it. So I'm wondering, what do you see in each of your different forums or kind of worlds here in education at UCI? What do you see as the next major change or advancement in your area of focus as it relates to student success or student learning? And maybe we will start with you, Vice Provost O'Dowd.
Okay. I think one of the things that we've been trying to do in the merit and promotion system is to encourage faculty to engage in self-reflective practice so that it both allows us to have a richer sense of what's happening in the classroom when we do merits and promotions, but the sort of broader and more important aspect of this, I think, is because we have a very open merit and promotion system where these files are discussed by the faculty as a whole, that it spreads the practice of innovative education between peers in a department in a way that couldn't really happen otherwise. And so I think it's an organic spreading, and I think that's something that we originally started out to think it would help us do a better job in evaluating merits and promotions, but it's really helped us more value them and to spread good practices. And I think that's important for the students so they get the best access to innovative approaches that my colleague put into place and I wouldn't have known about unless we discussed this in the merit and promotion process.
And Dean, obviously your place at the table is critically important. What are you seeing?
Well, so I think the biggest change happening to education, including education research, has to do with changes in technology. Technology is going to transform how we deliver education, as well as how we can measure and assess it, and therefore improve education. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't believe that technology is going to solve our problems. In fact, technology can amplify existing problems and make patterns of inequality worse. If you heard Professor D. Shu talk about online education can increase gaps in inequitable outcomes in education if it's not done accurately in research-based ways. And so, again, where we're going to see change, I think we're going to see increasingly education delivered through new online platforms. That's going to happen in U.S. higher education, for better or worse, in the weeks and months ahead, very quickly. And we also are going to have new measurement and assessment systems in place that technology makes possible to help us monitor and improve the education that we're delivering.
And Vice Chancellor Banks, recognizing that we can't shed our social persona like a lab coat when we come into the academic environment, with student affairs, what are you seeing?
You know, I think that's interesting because I think one of the things that we as student affairs professionals, and we've been talking about this for a while, but is really trying to make sure that people understand the connections and also the experiences that our students have outside of the classroom, that there's student learning happening there as well. And so I'll just use an example, just for instance, as a student worker position, we are really trying to push everyone within our division that any student that we're working with, there should be student learning outcomes tied to those positions. So that student is learning something even if it's being at the front desk, working in the Vice Chancellor's office, there has to be some student learning tied to that position. And, ideally what we would like to do is to have that connection as far as what they're learning in the classroom, have that applied in a real world setting, either through an internship, some sort of leadership position, even working in the Ant Eatery. There should be some connection to what's happening within the classroom and then also what they're doing outside of the classroom. I think that's really important. I don't know that people really understand that for so long, student affairs for some folks is just fun and games. But for us, we're educating the whole student, and we are a complement to the academic mission and to our academic partners, and we take that very seriously. So I think it's really putting that out there, talking about the narrative, the important work of student affairs, how we complement the academic mission, what we can do to help our partners within the classroom educate students and get them to that next level. Sometimes I like to say that, when you look for people or employers are looking for new people to hire, they want the best and the brightest, and I think we have the best and the brightest students here, and they're learning some great things within the classroom. But I think what's going to push them to that next step are those leadership experiences and those experiences that happen outside of that classroom. What are they learning when they go back to that residence hall and they're interacting with people from different backgrounds, the diversity piece? Because ultimately, if you want to get a job, employers, they want the smartest people. But ultimately, and I think for all of us here, you want to know that you're going to hire someone that can get along with people and that can navigate the diversity that is the world. And I think that's where student affairs can really provide that complement to the academic mission. And so we continue to talk about that and really push our professionals within the division when we're developing those job descriptions for students, that they have student learning outcomes, that it's just not answering a phone, but we're working with them to develop those skills and to really be able to verbalize it and say, this is what I'm learning. And this is when I graduate from UCI, this is my entire picture. Not only learning great things within the classroom, but outside of the classroom as well.
Well, and that's a great segue. Vice Chancellor, speaking of pushing professionals, and how is it that in your sphere in teaching and learning, what are the things that you're seeing, the changes you're seeing for your teams?
I think there's two things. The big one that I feel the faculty need to move towards is understanding teaching as a team effort. I think too often in our departments, we view teaching as each person's individual effort, and we don't take it as this coordinated thing. We hear a lot about inclusive excellence and diversity, which is incredibly important, and absolutely applies to teaching, meaning that the teaching team should be thought of as this diverse group, which they are, the faculty in a department, that are providing a unique experience to the students, but now do it intentionally. And that ties back to what Diane said. If we're sort of reading our reflective statements from each other, we can now be a bit more intentional. We realize our colleagues are actually doing incredible things we've never known before. We don't talk to them about it, and now we can engage with each other. So there's that piece. And then we heard from the students earlier, and it goes to what Willie was saying. They want to know that what they're doing in class is relevant to their life and the rest of the world. That was like one of the #1 messages from the students. And for faculty to embrace the fact that it's not, often faculty think, oh, if I'm making it too relevant, I've become just vocational training. Not that vocational training is bad, but sometimes it gets that negative thing, as opposed to, oh, I'm really educating the whole student to be the citizen. And that's been a theme throughout the summit today, is that what we're trying to do is educate engaged, active, and prepared citizens. And that happens throughout their entire experience. So for faculty to be intentional about these two things, intentionally acting as a team and intentionally engaging with the student in terms of how this will impact outside the classroom.
Well, that kind of leads into beautifully, so we're going to reverse order this. What are challenges that you're seeing to doing these things and really tackling these issues that are arising?
Yeah. Well, I think the #1 challenge I tend to find for change in the classroom is ironically, I think, the same challenge students find towards their success, and that's time. I mean, faculty, like the rest of the world, Richard mentioned technology. Technology, among many things, have made the demands on our time actually increase, not decrease. Our demands on our research time have only increased. And a lot of that, unfortunately, is driven by ourselves. We're kind of a closed system, and we demand more and more research from the next generation of faculty. And there is only so much time in the day. So if you're going to stop and have room to breathe and rethink what you're doing and be intentional, you need time to do that. And I view the creation of my office very strongly from the point of view of trying to find a way to get faculty those moments of time. And this is why the partnership with Diane's office is so critical. They already have to do their merit and tenure. There's no choice on that. So if part of that is the time where we get them to think about teaching, it's kind of a win-win. I've carved out some of that time and helped with that barrier.
So I think it's, going off what Michael said, I think there's some challenges as far as really convincing the university and the specific pockets of the university to really work together. And I think one of the most interesting things about being at this institution is that we are so decentralized in a lot of ways that I don't think that we really capitalize on the power and the energy and the intellect of collective other parts of the university to really move some of these issues forward. I would say that within student affairs, we would love to be working more with faculty around certain issues, and I think if you look at other institutions that have residential college models, let's think about the faculty that are involved in the day-to-day life of our students. Even there are institutions that think about how can we get new junior faculty to live within the residence halls to provide that connection for those students who are moving in to a professor. And I think what's interesting is we have a high percentage of first-generation college students. We have a very diverse population. So the entire notion of these students being here in college is very different from what you see classically in the academy. For people who are able to navigate those spaces, they think every college campus is just the same. And so if you're a young faculty member coming in and you've been steeped in this tradition, you may come in with the mindset that every student you're going to encounter understand what the bursar's office is, or to come to office hours. And for first-generation college students, especially diverse first-generation college students, this is all foreign to them. It's a very new concept. So, I think that's one of the challenges, is trying to get people. I think there are some faculty out there that really understand what this is all about and really changing their teaching and learning. But I would love to see more of a emphasis on really cross-collaboration, getting faculty into some of the residence halls, even student affairs professionals being in the classroom. A lot of us have our PhDs. What can we do to help with that piece in the classroom? But I think sometimes when we're at Research One institutions, it gets very steeped in tradition and your credentials and what you're doing, and I think that sometimes can be a challenge. But I think if we collectively work together, we could probably address some of those things.
I have no doubt.
Yeah.
Dean, how about you?
Yeah, I share that sentiment exactly, that the biggest challenge is we want to think about students holistically, but the university life is siloed into these different units. And so I said before the importance of technology and measurement. In order to create an effective measurement system to track our students and improve performance, you need to draw on data generated from different units, integrate it together, and then feed back findings so that institutional improvement can occur in the different pockets of the university. So that's possible, but a barrier to that is that the work is occurring in these separate units, and the time involved in, going back to Michael Dennin's comment, the time involved in coordinating across these units is significant.
Yeah, I guess I'm feeling a challenge right now because about 4 years ago, we really made a strong push in the academic personnel review process to say, you really need to show excellence, not just in your scholarly area, but in your teaching or service. Those are the statements. That's as far as we could go. I wanted to say teaching and service, but we didn't get there.
Next year.
And I would say we've been ramping this up, and it's been going really well. This year, we're seeing a little bit more pushback from the faculty, where we have a Senate body that weighs in on files, and coming all the way from the department level up to that, there has been this year, I feel, more pushback on, I simply don't have the time to be an outstanding researcher and do these other things, and so I should get my merit and promotion, even though this time I didn't do that much teaching, or I didn't do that much service. So our challenge right now is to try and keep the momentum going forward while recognizing that time is definitely a serious consideration.
Well, and one of the great things I think about UCI in particular is that while we are one of the finest research institutions in the world, we implement our research, right, in real time. And so we've identified some of the issues that we're seeing in the broadening of education, the greater diversity with our student body population. We've also identified some of the challenges. But one of the things that makes us anteaters is that we bring solutions to the table. So I would love to start with you to identify what are some solutions that you're seeing, whether it be cross-collaboration or emphasizing service in tandem with educating, knowing that we do exist to educate students, right? I mean, that is kind of our task. What are some solutions that you see coming?
Well, I think that it's us working together as across the administration, across the school, across student affairs, and working very closely with the schools. And so I think that we are doing that to some extent, but it can be expanded. And I think, Willie, your idea of not only faculty being involved at residences, but administrators and having, I know there are programs that when in BioSci where students get a set of tickets and they can invite their faculty member to lunch, that maybe there should be more of that could go not just to, go across a broader swath of the university so people understand what it is to be an anteater at a broader level.
Yeah, and Dean, as you're raising up the next generation of educators and creating the curriculum that will lead us into continuing generations, what are some solutions that you see?
Yeah, well, I think the solution most relevant to this conversation and that we're most proud of is we're putting in place a state-of-the-art measurement system for tracking undergraduate students holistically. And so we have 1,200 students we're following over time from freshmen and juniors as they progress longitudinally through the system. We're attending to them holistically, so asking them questions on a weekly surveys about their extracurricular participation, their apprenticeships, their internships. We're asking about mentoring experiences, also stress and mental health, discrimination, microaggressions they might have experienced, as well as the advisement and academic experiences in the classroom. This is something we're developing to improve institutional performance at UCI, but we're also very intentionally designing it as a system that can be deployed throughout U.S. higher education to improve performance elsewhere. And so we've launched into collaborations with a number of groups, including the John Gardner Institute, to push this measurement system out into the field as a whole, to have measurement and assessment be part of the solution in improving undergraduate education nationally.
That's incredibly exciting, and knowing that we tend to be on the leading edge of a lot of these initiatives, and that students come as whole people. They don't just show up with their textbooks, they show up with everything they experienced the night before, that morning. What are some of the solutions that you see, Vice Chancellor?
Well, I think it goes back to, the role of student affairs in really educating our faculty and the larger campus community on the diversity of our student body. I think in my short 9 months here, what I have witnessed is that we know that the world is hard, but I think that sometimes we forget that sometimes our students are facing even greater challenges within the classroom, how people talk to them, how the information is being translated. And I think part of our role and part of the solution is really providing education for our faculty and then administrators and the campus on how diverse we are. And we can't use one model to educate the entire student body. So I think that's really one of the solutions, is like we have to go out there and teach people about the diversity of our student body. And I would just say, like, even for African American students, for our Latinx population, they're not a monolith. And I think when we have people that assume that I see X, Y, Z, that this is going to be their experience. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about doing this work, is really educating a professorate that may not have experienced and really had the chance to educate a very diverse student population. And I think that's one of the things that student affairs can really have a big role in, especially around the resource centers. I mean, we have a Latinx resource center, Women's Hub, LGBTQ, a Black resource center. We're even talking about doing one for Asian American Pacific Islanders. But they all come with different sets of issues, celebrations, and really we have to educate everyone on how do we approach teaching for a diverse student body. And I think part of that is acknowledging that there are differences within the classroom, there are differences within our students, and we have to acknowledge them and say, we get it. And let's talk about how are we going to talk about chemistry for every single person in the room.
Absolutely. And we started with you, so we will end with you.
You know, I actually think one of the solutions is the faculty themselves, and the fact that at UCI, they're getting it. I mean, to be honest. And one example of that is we have an active learning institute that almost 200 faculty have now been through. I mean, the thought of faculty spending, I don't know, 8 to 10 weeks, every other week for 90 minutes, and then allowing us to observe them teach to receive final certification is almost unheard of at any, actually I think I can safely say it's unheard of at any other institution of higher ed. And the fact that there's always a wait list for it, there's basically 200 faculty, that's close to what, 20% of our faculty. They're from all ranks, all disciplines. The most exciting thing I can say publicly, and then knock on wood so it's not cursed, I've received not a single complaint from faculty about this institute, and faculty have complained about everything else I've done in my job.
I can attest to that.
Right. And so that's just amazing. Now it does help, so maybe the solution is you build a roughly $60 million building and announce to get priority teaching you need to do this. I don't know, that did lead to some motivation, but it's happening. There's waiting lists, and now they're requesting version 2.0. The faculty are asking us, they like this so much, they're asking for more professional development. And those 200 faculty are sitting in their units having more fun teaching, having their students more excited and doing better, and their colleagues are looking at them going, how are you doing this, and how is this working, can I get in on the action? So that's one of the solutions, I think.
And I think that kind of leads into a mentor-mentee relationship. You have dual growth on both sides.
Yeah.
So as we continue to have a broader student body population, the educators are also growing, and their lives are enriched, and it's more life-giving.
Yeah.
I have to say that this just continues to make me ridiculously proud to be an alumni of this university and its commitment to really leading and teaching in the 21st century. I don't know if we have time for questions.
We have 5 minutes for questions, if
All
anyone
right.
wants to ask one.
Everyone's shy. Oh.
So I actually have two questions, and they're both data related, so I'm going to put them together in one thing, because I think there are issues where what we do is really hampered by the lack of good data that we have. And one area actually has to do with the extracurricular activities. I mean, we're beginning to have a student data warehouse. It's not quite where it ought to be yet, but that warehouse does not contain any information about the extracurricular activities that students are engaged in. And it seems like to the extent those are important, we ought to be recording them, and we ought to be able to use them to assess our success and see which ones are really working and which ones aren't. And a similar kind of thing has to actually do with teaching. I sit on a department that we get lots of these cases come through, and invariably, yes, there is this addendum where somebody's written about their teaching. It's sort of like, asking my students, well, tell me why you've been great in my class. And I don't think, at least at the department level, it gets paid a lot of attention to. And what I see in the written reports is invariably some comment about the student evaluations, which is a tool that has been documented to be almost worthless. And so I'm not quite sure why we pay so much attention to that tool. And we don't, for example, very much observe each other's classes, do the kinds of things that might actually provide us with better information about who's really being successful at educating students versus maybe making them happy with their class.
So is your question kind of related to how are we tracking that data?
Yeah, both kinds of data. What can we do better? And is it actually feasible to do either of those things better?
I guess I'll address the, the evaluation. So I believe that student evaluations are a very important tool, but they cannot be the only tool. And so we put in place 4 years ago that one of the first places that said you can't just do student evaluations, you have to do something else. The reflective teaching statements were, you put anything in that bucket the first time. We said you could put in your syllabus, you could put in a teaching statement, you could put in peer observations, awards, and the most common thing were reflective teaching statements. And I went through every file that went through that year, 400 of them, and I looked at what things were commented on. And that was the one that was most commented on, and at all different levels. And it's not always used well, but in general, if I was to say, and in my classroom, I've started using clickers to engage the students in understanding how they arrive at a solution to a complicated problem. And if all the student evaluations say, yeah, they use the iClickers for attendance, that is a point of reference to say this statement is probably not going to help us very much. Whereas when you get statements that say, I did that, and the students say, the clickers really helped me understand this, especially when we had discussions. So it's really up to our faculty at the unit level, at the department level, to really talk about how you can use these tools. And I really support peer observations. We have on our website 4 different tools for doing those in an effective way, because they can be very helpful in that somebody describes what happens in the classroom, what does the website look like, how do the students interact, or they can be really unhelpful to say, the faculty member was the most knowledgeable person I've ever seen give a lecture on this, the students were fully engaged, and the student evaluations say they read off their slides and it's just what's in the book. So again, all tools have strengths and weaknesses. I never am in favor of throwing out a tool, but I'm always in favor of using tools as appropriate and triangulating, just like we do for our research. We don't just look at where the paper is published, but we look at how people are using it and what are the venues. So
I'll add one quick thing to Diane's comments is this is where the interaction and the teamwork is really key. The fact that we now require something else besides evaluations has to propagate further, and our office is there to help people do it better. Yeah. So if people decide on peer evaluation to do that well, so we're trying to get out to the departments and help them rethink how they use these different tools. But I think you're exactly right, Ted. In that space, we now need to go to phase 2 of the evaluation. Do you want to say anything about the student affairs data, Willie, or?
Yes and no. I agree with you. I think that we should be tracking that information. I know that we're working with Michael's office to try to figure out what's the best course for that. I don't think that's a unique problem to UCI. I think that other institutions really struggle with how do we keep track of those types of things, and I don't know that anyone has figured out the best solution.
We are hoping version 2.0 of the student ID card will be a big help.
That will be helpful, yes, but there's still other ways that we need to track some things.
Well, thank you all for sharing with us how version 2.0 in education is coming about on our campus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the schedule does say 5 o'clock closing remarks. The closing remarks are thank you so much for coming. And the video ones will be available as soon as we have them available. And I really want to thank the panelists, all the speakers. The students have all left. We can thank them in absentia. But thank you all for making it to the very end.